Assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm Aizah. I'm your host for today, and आज का हमारा सबसे पहला एपिसोड है of Bookish Venture. We have two students of ZABFM with us, जिनके साथ हम बात करेंगे classic literature के बारे में and mainly about the author who is very popular nowadays, Virginia Woolf. One of her quotes that I personally really like a lot is, "If you do not tell the truth about yourself, you cannot do it about other people." So let's get into it. Let's ask as many questions as possible from our two very own guests. So I would be really glad if you guys introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Alizeh Hassan. I'm from the social science department in the 5th semester, and I'm a psych major.
That's great. And what about you?
Hi, I'm Usman. I'm also in the 5th semester. I'm a psych major, and yeah, I'm doing social sciences. So it's really fun.
That's great. So is it like the author Virginia Woolf, is she like very common जो लोग पढ़ते हैं उन्हें are mostly from social sciences, or is it like very generic?
I feel like everyone can read her stuff, but like at the end of the day, not everyone's able to digest that. So knowing that I am a psych major and having read about the human psyche and the stream of consciousness, the brain, you just really, as a psych major, as a person who studies sociology, when you really lean towards Virginia Woolf more, even some people who like love literature or Urdu, yeah, as long as you're an empath, as long as you have the brain for it, you can really read her stuff.
Like, I would agree with that because it's like Virginia Woolf has the stream of consciousness style of writing, so it's like a very specific way. So even I have friends who are in the same major and stuff who said that, they just couldn't digest the book, so they left it. And that breaks my heart. But basically, I understand that it can be difficult to digest and swallow if, like, you're not already studying in social sciences or literature. But I would still say, okay, even if it's a bit of a challenge, you really need to, like, actually delve into the books because they're so good.
That's great. We have some brave readers. This day we are gonna try to, and I would really encourage people to try to get into classical literature because we go on about thriller books, we have fiction books, fantasy books, but when it comes to classic literature, it's completely different. Like the first word you read or the first sentence you read, you can actually really relate. Not relate in a sense that it's very difficult. It might be difficult, but it is very different. So it's one of the ways कि differentiate हो जाए बिल्कुल ही कि classic literature है, because I think 19th century and now this is 21st century and there is this very wide gap. Ideas are constantly developing. एक के बाद एक changes आती हैं, so there is no set motion of things or ideas. So when it comes to 19th century की books, for example, now today we are talking about Virginia Woolf की books. So if you guys were to suggest the books that you have read it and like how are they still, the ideas in it or the topics discussed in it or the main or the core ideas, how are they still relevant आजकल के लिए?
I guess I'll go first. I think, first of all, like these writers, Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Plath, Kafka, all of them, like in the 90s, they really set the foundation for literature. So they were pioneers, and because of them, so many other people started writing and started exploring the landscape for literature. But it's so interesting, like they wrote stuff way back when the world was detached from technology and stuff, but still, like as someone living in the 21st century, I can relate to Virginia Woolf so much because she like will unearth every emotion, every thought that a person is going through. She's going to talk about depression. Like everyone has some sort of mental illness or struggle with mental health these days, and Virginia really talks about that. She unearths it. She just goes very deep into the human psyche in the inner monologue, and that's really relatable. That's like someone who is sad or depressed half the time or just confused. You can really relate to her books, her characters. I read The Waves. It was amazing. I related to all six of the characters, although
Oh gosh.
it was so interesting to do that. And yeah, I guess I'll elaborate on that later.
Okay, so I would say that like I said earlier too, I understand that the writing style is a little intimidating. because the stream of consciousness, it's like even I, as someone who's kind of used to reading Virginia Woolf now, it's like even I would get lost. कि ये जा कहाँ रही है? Like literally. And then I get that it can be a challenge, but then I feel like that's what adds to the beauty of that writing style, because it's like it's a book, like the one I read was Mrs. Dalloway, and usme it's like a story that literally washes over you and it takes you with the waves, and you like sometimes you're drowning and that's fine, but like other times is just so interesting. And it's like as you get invested in the character stories, and then even when drastic changes or not so many changes happen to them, it's like you're just there for the ride, and it's so cool. And then the other thing I would say, coming back to your question about like how is it relevant today, I would say I feel like Usman said, it's like very, very relatable, the things that Virginia Woolf talks about for a few people. Like I relate with Usman here, like I do relate to everything Virginia Woolf discusses in her stories. But I'll also say ki like Virginia Woolf not only is unique in her writing style, but she's so unique in the characters she portrays, in the perspectives that she shares. It's like even if you see a character for like 5 pages, it's still such a unique and beautiful perspective, and so interesting and different. And I feel like that is something that's so timeless. It's like even now, like I feel like it's just like abhi bhi agar paro to, like some people will be able to relate and some people will not, but it'll still be something so beautiful to like experience and read through. And that's why I'm repeating myself, but that's why I feel like her works, all of them, are just really timeless, no matter when you read them.
Okay, so going deeper into those waves, now that we talk about Virginia Woolf, so Usman have read a different book, Alizeh have read one different book, and obviously हर किसी का अपनी अपनी एक favorite book होती है. So Usman, when it comes to you, would you like to share a bit about the story of the book?
So it's interesting because like whenever this was written in 1931, so it was one of her later works, and it was very experimental. It wasn't one of her best writings, and that's one thing that a lot of people who are even fans of Virginia or just into literature would say. She really delves deep into like the psyche of 6 different characters, but at the same time it's so convoluted. Like the storylines, like you will at one point there's 6 characters, 3 boys, 3 girls. There's Neville, Bernard, Lewis, and the girls are Jenny, Susan, and Rhoda. And they all they're childhood friends, and they have one mutual friend who's like the focal point or like the center character who brings them all together constantly. That's I forgot his name. That's Percival. Sorry. So he is like all of them. Like they're living their different lives. They have their different perspectives, and at one part, they all eventually grow up. They're living their separate lives, but then they all reunite for a family dinner, and because they're celebrating Percival, who's going to India soon. So with all of that stuff, it's so different that we have like Rhoda living a very sad life. We have Ginny who's really into just celebrating herself and her femininity. Then we have Susan who's very closed off and just loves nature and uh, purity, so to say, and she just wants to become a mother. So there, and then we have Neville, who's so sensitive. We have Bernard, who is very sensible. Lewis, who loves order and just wants everything to be in a particular arrangement. So they're different characters. They have their different likes and dislikes, different ways that they interact with each another, think about each another. But then, like, what I love about the book is I didn't at the same time I could relate to each character, but at the same time I didn't care which character was narrating the story. I was like, yeah, so what if it's Rhoda talking about her life? I still feel like I can relate to this person. So everyone was like, there's 6 people, they're narrating, they're talking over each another, a big mesh of like ideas and thoughts and feelings, but at the same time you just become so involved in it. Like it's like the waves, they're crashing over you, and at one point it's gonna ebb, it's going to flow, it's going to just keep going on, and with the ride you just go with it. You don't really care what happens, you just experience it all. And that's what true literature or true writing does to a person. You're just feeling it all, every line, every description. So that's what was so interesting in the book. It wasn't very eventful, it wasn't very character, there weren't big storylines or character arcs or like big reveals in the story. There was very mundane, normal cheeses ho rahi thi, but at the same time it was so relatable that I was like, yeah, so what if I'm the character, I'm waking up one day and I'm drinking my tea and having my burnt toast. I can relate to that. Or I could relate to how all the boys, when they went to boarding school, how they felt and how they liked. Some of them really liked the order and the discipline that they had to mold their characters or personalities into, and some of them didn't like that. They rebelled against it. So I'm just going off on a tangent here, but
It's
like
great.
it's so
Okay.
interesting. Like you just get immersed into it, and it's like it doesn't end. And what was so beautiful about the book is that it's not poetry, but it's kind of like so poetic that the way it's written, it has 9 different parts. So each part starts off with a different setting of the day. Like the book starts off with it being early morning, and towards the like in the middle part, we come towards an evening scene when the sun is setting, and towards the end there's like night time has descended onto all of the characters. They're living their normal lives, the day has ended, and it's so interesting how a whole book can just flow through a frame of a day or what goes on in nature, but still connect that to the lives of people. Like going like I'm sorry, I'm just babbling
That's
here.
great. We want to hear more about the book.
But like for example, it starts off with early morning, right? So everyone's like they're fresh and they're awake, and it's like the characters can really connect with what time of day it is. And then when it's evening or the sun is setting, the characters have a certain gloominess to their personalities. They're like, yeah, the day is ending, there's no more freshness, there's no more rejuvenation here, there's like just what was there in life already. So it's a very convoluted story. There's like things happening over and over, and not a lot of events, but a lot of stream of consciousness. That's what it is. Like everything just flows. It just does not stop. It melts into something or the other. It connects into another story, and you'll be like, when you tell an outsider, they'll be like, "What? Where's the web here? Where? How are you connecting the dots?" But like, if you read the book, they'll be like, "Yeah, so what? One event does lead to another, chain reaction." It's just a precarious balance and way of life that Virginia really amazingly writes about. So that's it for now.
Okay, that's great how it does, because I read it somewhere. Apparently it's in thriller books mostly, okay, when you're not aware about the routines वगैरह, ठीक है, you are likely to go crazy. Routine in the sense like when you're aware कि अभी daytime है, अभी night time है, and you know you feel more fresh वगैरह during the daytime. So I believe the book that Usman have read, उसमें इस चीज़ पे भी कहा गया है, and also about the nature. Nature is very important. It's like we all are independently surviving because of each other. So that's one great thing. Also, Usman also talked about that there is this web जो कि जाके dots connect होते हैं. So I would like to ask Alizeh if it's like the case in your book too, because it's by the same author, or like the setting is completely different from it.
See, it's like I haven't read The Waves yet, but like hearing Usman talk about it, it made me realize Mrs. Dalloway is so similar in a way, because it's like the theme of like going through a day, that's right there in Mrs. Dalloway too. It's basically just like the whole story, like there's no divisions, no chapters, no nothing. It's just this constant flow. Like one page is not separated from the other in any way. It's just like this constant flow of like consciousness, and also like a flow of the day passing. So like it's maybe the only thing that like in this story that might separate ke, you know, time guzar raha hai, naya section through hua hai in a way to the character's day, is the strike of the Big Ben, the clock, you know. So it's like
Okay, you got us there. Yes.
so it's like essentially तो उसकी वजह से ही like a new hour starts and a new like, you know, like it's not necessary that something new would happen in the characters' lives, but like something would shift a little bit. And like it's like the two main characters we follow in the story are Septimus and Clarissa, and it's like Clarissa is like this affluent upper class lady, and her day is one where she's planning this party, and pure din mein, like her party just, it's like her day kind of just, it's normal, but it also is going on a escalating tone, you could say. Because it's like, think about it. Like, if you set a party and you're the one organizing all of it, like, even the day starts with her, like, getting flowers. So she's doing chores first, then she's setting up the house, then she's doing this, then she's meeting people, then she's making calls, and then in the end, it's the party that's happening. So in her story, it's kind of escalating throughout the day, whereas the other character, Septimus, his day is like de de-escalating kind of. It's like falling essentially, and I'm not going to spoil what happens in his story's climax because that's a big spoiler, but basically all I'm going to say is that it's like essentially like this, but you can't exactly say Clarissa's perspective is all positive either. Like that's where the element of like mental instability comes in and like mental illness comes in, because it's like Septimus ki story ye hai ki he's literally suffering from PTSD because he fought in the war. And then Clarissa की story ये है कि she has everything supposedly. She's affluent. She has a supposedly loving husband and a daughter that she cares about a lot and riches and all that. And she's part of a really high-fi circle of society. But then she just has this anxiety eating her inside, and it's so evident when you're inside her brain. So it's like for both of them, things do escalate, but I genuinely love, and I'm surprised to know that waves में similar concept है, but I love that as the day goes on, their mental health gets more and more haywire.
Oh God.
And like it's like you would think in a book where it's constant stream of consciousness and nothing is setting apart, you know, sections of the book, there's no chapters, no nothing, you would think there's no climax to that kind of story, but then there is, and that's what I love. And I love that dono characters can climax with that. And yeah, and I'm not going to talk too much about it, but just to give a general vibe of the story, I will read out one quote from it that I feel like really portrays not only कि story में क्या हो रहा है, but also just like the way I explain an ordinary day is going, and that is paired with the characters' kind of chaotic, kind of really fast mindsets and like mind frames, like that is there. And then there's also like this quote, I feel it represents Virginia's writing style as well. Because like, you know what, I'll just read it.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So on a summer's day, waves collect, overbalance and fall, collect and fall, and the whole world seems to be saying, that is all, more and more ponderously, until even the heart in the body which lies in the sun on the beach says too, that is all. Fear no more, says the heart, fear no more, says the heart, committing its burden to some sea, which sighs collectively for all sorrows, and renews, begins, collects, lets fall. And the body alone listens to the passing bee, the wave breaking, the dog barking, far away barking and barking. Heavens, the front doorbell! Exclaimed Clarissa.
No, that's something kind of. It feels, as much as I'm understanding, I feel as if when you're reading her book, you cannot separate yourself from the mind of character. Like you're too much into it. So sometimes does it happen that you are reading a book and then you suddenly shout Clarissa or something out aloud in your house, and then you see your family members that because the way that you have read it, it's like you're very much into the book, into the character's mind. So does this sort of thing has ever happened?
It's basically like the way I would describe this quote specifically and why I feel like it represents the book so much is because it's like एक जगह पे they're like I said, their mind is like going haywire, and दूसरी जगह पे it's like she's exclaiming, oh, the front doorbell, you know. So it's like there's this sort of mix of like being in your mind and then being reminded and woken up by reality, like a bell being struck, kind of. And I feel like that could be represented also by the Big Ben key bell that I talked about earlier. So I feel like it's really cool in the story. And personally, while I was reading it, I don't think it like, well, also, there's also the fact that I was reading it for an assignment. So it's like I couldn't get away from it. But even if I wanted to, it's just a story that immerses you so much. I feel like there's just this flow. Like even in this one quote, it's like there's this flow of things just going, and then like something breaks that flow, and it's just great. You never lose attention, or maybe that's just me. So yeah.
That's great. So it might happen the next time that I hear a doorbell. I might wake up from my dreams, or I might just put it as my alarm so that whenever I'm dreaming or even daydreaming, I can just break from that. So Usman, like Alizeh said that she have, for example, her favorite quote that she read. So do you have any favorite quote from the book that you have read of Virginia Woolf?
I wish I did, but like the thing is, it's the way that the waves is written is so poetic that almost every
Oh, I
part
get that.
is like one of my favorites. It starts off with like prose, like it's like the sun had not risen yet. The sea was indistinguishable from the sky, except that the sea was slightly caressed as if a cloth had wrinkles in it. Gradually, as the sky whitened, the dark line lay on the horizon, dividing the sea from the sky, and the grey cloth became barred with the thickness of the strokes moving, one after the other, beneath the surface, following each other, pursuing each other perpetually. Like it's just like just talking about the waves there, it's so in depth. Like you just don't. I don't think there's a favorite quote. I think
It's more like
boil
it
it
that
down
it
to
is very descriptive, and आई डोंट थिंक अभी तक दोनों में से किसी ने भी कोई ऐसा कुछ पढ़ा जो कि बिल्कुल शॉर्ट सा हो, छोटा सा. आई बिलीव दैट शी इज लाइक डिस्क्राइबिंग एंड ऑल्सो बिकॉज शी वॉन्ट्स यू कि जहाँ पे वो खुद है मेंटली तौर पे, यू शुड बी देयर टू, बिकॉज व्हेन यू रीड इट यू आर लाइक, oh, I'm by the sea, I'm standing there, maybe I'm like visualizing it.
exactly.
So do you think कि is this like an element होता है हर एक author का? For example, some are very narrative, some might go for first person point of view से आपको story बताएंगे. So and I am assuming कि इन दोनों books में you have this first person point of view. So is it because can you relate it more, or like is it easy to read it because it's the first person opinion? Or imagine, if possible, what if it was like second person of point of view, yeah, third person point of view, but the story remains the same. For example, Usman mentioned that there were 5 friends, okay? And rather than first person point of view, it would have been like this particular friend is telling about the other friend. So do you think you would have like gotten so much into the book even if the story remained the same? So if it was just the little thing that was altered, do you think you would still feel very relatable with it?
Okay, so with The Waves and also with Dalloway, and also another book that I think we've both read, A Room of One's Own. वो थोड़ी छोटी सी है, but like I feel like उसमें specifically it was completely Virginia Woolf's own perspective. So it was just a first person sort of. I think people have called it an essay. I may be wrong, so don't quote me. But basically, it's like उसमें specifically it's completely just first person being inside the author's head. And it's like it's the same with these novels too, but like they're more of a story. And then with A Room of One's Own, it's like you're in her head. And it's just like the thing you said in the middle about how, the author wants you to be where she is mentally. I feel like it really is that. I feel like it's like with everything she writes, she's just like, listen, I'm suffering and I'm here mentally. Why don't you join me?
It is okay. Collective suffering makes it a bit easier to bear the hardships. Yes.
Exactly. She makes it so relatable and great. And it's just like, I feel like if it wasn't first person, even if it's a narrative story like the books we read, or if it's like, a non-fiction ish kind of thing like Room of One's Own, I feel like if it's not first person, it wouldn't be Virginia Woolf. Like, I feel like her signature writing, Stream of Conscience, is also just about her being like, this is what's going on in my head and I'm showing it to you. And that is so intimate and also interesting. I love it. Shut up now.
No, it's great.
Like it was what was really needed for the readers to like be immersed, because Dalloway and like other stuff that she wrote, Orlando, all of this, like it had undertones of like feminist literature, because it
Yeah.
was that. And she was a feminist, so she did really talk about the things that were social issues. Even like that's why you need to be the character to relate to it and understand their struggle, whether that's on like women issues or gender issues, or issues like of the mind. You have to be the character, you have to empathize with the character in order to. So she was really doing her activism work through the books. Even she had to do that. And so I really feel like that was so important for her to do, because like if that wasn't the case, like you said, if we weren't in her mind, and if there was like the tiny bit detail was different, we would just put the book aside, because it's really dense, it's really hard to read. I read this in COVID. I read all of Virginia's books in COVID, so I just was thinking about the character, being the character, and being inspired by the character, grieving with the character, being happy with the character. And that's what is important. Like you have to fully be the character and understand their story. So yeah, so even if it's like social work that she was doing through these writings, it was really impressive and important and needed.
Yeah, I agree. It's like the whole point is just like if you're not like the whole thing that makes these stories so great is just like I said, the intimacy of it. And with what Usman said too, it's just like you wouldn't be so engrossed and Virginia Woolf's writing wouldn't be so great if like you weren't literally inside her head or literally inside each character's head. I agree.
That's great, because now that I understand, like again, I'm gonna mention 19th century and the 21st century. The centuries, you see, in 21st century, we are so outspoken about stuff.
Yeah.
We are gonna communicate about mental issues, we communicate about social issues. We find something that there is causing a little bit of a problem or disturbance in the society, we communicate about it. But when it comes to 19th century, things were very different. That was very difficult. So it was like, it's so great to know that there was some author, because the author can bring about everything on the plate, and not everyone can digest it. It's gonna be that not everyone can digest it, but the ones who does, they get inspired. अक्सर you get inspired. जो आपको authors पसंद होते हैं, you're gonna be like, we might have a very similar thinking. And for example, regardless of the centuries वगैरह, for instance, Virginia Woolf talked about this certain issue, or not even issue, a random thought or an idea, because जैसे उसकी books में जा रहा है, descriptive जा रहा है, but some sort of it is random too, and then there's this serious thing too, and then there's mental health वगैरह too. So after reading her books, like, do you feel the need, for example, till now that I have read that things have always been there in this society, exist करती हैं, should I like, I'm definitely gonna, मैंने psychology पढ़ना है, और मैंने definitely जाना, like, did she inspire you in that way? Because you could have been like many do, कि उन्होंने कोई एक बुक पढ़ ली है जिसमें द वेरी ब्लफ्ड कैरेक्टर वो कोई इकोनॉमिक्स की फील्ड वगैरह में है, दे आर वर्किंग इन विद ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस वगैरह, एंड दे गेट इंस्पायर्ड, एंड देन दे लाइक, व्हेन वी गो टू यूनिवर्सिटी वी आर गोना परस्यू इकोनॉमिक्स एंड देन वी आर गोना मेजर इन इट. Did it happen with you कि वर्जीनिया वुल्फ पढ़ने से पहले were your ideas like different about psychology? Did it affect you in any way?
Personally, it's like it's not just like about psychology. My interests also really lie in literature, if that wasn't obvious already. But it's like reading, and also Virginia Woolf is like literally my favorite author. So it's like reading her just kind of established my love for both of these subjects even more. And also Virginia Woolf helped me realize, okay, like I suppose I do write too. So it's like, it's embarrassing to say when we're talking about such a great author, but it's like when I read her, I realize, okay, like, there's something so, like, you can be essentially shameless when you're writing. Like, your writing can be the most
gory ever. And I don't mean like literal gore. I mean like the deepest parts of your heart you can really just spill out into your words. And I feel like Virginia Woolf is an author that like does that so well.
Yeah.
So since हमें इतनी सारी तो knowledge मिल गई है about the book and the author, but if you guys were to suggest, like अगर किसी ऐसे reader को पढ़नी है जिसने अभी तक वर्जीनिया वुल्फ की कोई किताब try नहीं करी है, उसने अभी तक classical literature की for example कोई book try नहीं करी है, so अगर when it comes to Virginia Woolf, which book would you guys suggest कि थोड़ा आसानी से digest हो जाए, as you guys mentioned, और वो आसानी से थोड़ी reading से कर दे, which book would it be of Virginia Woolf?
I guess I would suggest To the Lighthouse because it's very relatable, normal. It's about family life, so that's going to be nice and easy to read.
For me, I would suggest A Room of One's Own because, like I said earlier, it's kind of short, and also it's like the writer is like you're basically just in Virginia Woolf's head, so it's like it has a more digestible flow. And maybe because it was my first Virginia Woolf work myself, so like that's what got me into her works. So I feel like it's a safe option. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. So we hope that the readers who are trying to try classical literature, or maybe you have read it, so you could always be like, like collect your thoughts and write about it and let us know. And as for those who want to try, they could eventually go for these two good recommendations. And with that, we are gonna end our very first episode. And I would really like to thank you guys for being here, for sharing this immense knowledge with us, because literature is important. Any century, any time, any day, it is literature. It's part of our lives. So eventually, कहीं ना कहीं से आके आपकी जो है literature से contact तो होना ही है. So I'm so glad and happy that you guys shared your thoughts with us, and also the stories to Virginia Woolf and how like she highlights certain things, certain elements क्या हैं या उसकी signature writing क्या है, and I hope the viewers found it very useful. And with that, we are gonna say bye for now and see you in the next episode of Bookish Banter. Thank you.
Thank you.